All right, here we go, everyone. Welcome to the 28th. And I did check ahead of time, so I know I'm right. The 28th episode of Dear Dr. Fantasy. And for the 28th episode, I have as my guest someone I think many of you will recognize, one of the bright personalities of Booktube, overly average Ben. Hello, Ben. How are you?
Hello, not too bad. I to give a background story into what it's like for Philip preparing for these episodes, I turned up about 8 minutes late and had to be messaged. So first off, apologies and thank you for having me on.
Oh yeah, no need to apologize whatsoever. It was just a pleasant way to anticipate the conversation even more. So, yeah, I'm excited to have you here and to talk about Booktube and to talk about your reading journey and whatever else might come up. I am an admirer of your sense of humor. And that is, I think, a trademark, it's fair to say, of your channel. You've got a good amount of humor in your videos, and it can be a bit dry at times, I think, right? Is that fair? Am I being fair?
I think that's fair, yeah. Especially like someone outside of England coming in can be a bit like, oh, what's happening here? Yeah.
Yeah, you've done some great skits in the past, and I've enjoyed. You've been making these videos about reading other people's favorites and that sort of thing, and that's all been fun. You even made me one of them, so it was fun to force you to read Beowulf and and some Virginia Woolf and other stuff. And of course, you've been reading Malazan on your own, so I didn't really have to encourage you for that one, I guess, but.
Yeah, absolutely. It was one of the reasons I asked you. I was like, who's going to guarantee as well to give me what I desperately want to read? And I thought, Phillips, there's no way it's not going to be Malazan. So I was ready and raring for that.
But then you had to read Beowulf and Mrs. Dalloway too.
Well, luckily enough, Mrs. Dalloway was on my reading list for the semester coming up at university. So that also came up perfectly for me.
So you're just going to be an A student then because of
That's
me.
It. Exactly so.
So, well, that's great. Well, and I want to congratulate you too on the end of, or you're entering your holiday period over there as we are here. So hopefully you'll get to relax a little bit before you have to start reading again, all that stuff.
Yeah, I get to fit in the Tawny Man trilogy before going back to university. So
nice. I'm starting in January myself with Tawny Man.
Very nice.
Yeah, I'm going to be doing a read along with Mike and Madison and Scott and Jake Bishop for the Realm of the Elderlings. So I'm really excited about that. And I've read in the past, I read Farseer many years ago, and I read Live Ship Traders a couple of years ago. And Live Ship I was able to cover on the channel because it was after I started the channel. But Farseer I had read before I even knew what Booktube was. So have you, is this your first time getting through Realm of the Elderlings?
This is my first time, yeah. So I've been reading it with Grace, and we've been reading the entire series together. So yeah, I'm reading Fool's Fate at the moment, ready to finish for the next year. So
cool. Also, you're almost done with Tawny Man. Yeah. Okay. So you're ahead of me. I have to start probably in the first week of January. I'll be starting with what is the first one? Fools. There's a lot of fools in these titles.
Fool's Errand.
Fool's Errand. Yes, that's right. Yeah. So I have those 3 books ready for me. So I'll be reading one in January, one in February, one in March. That's the plan. But yeah, cool. And how would you rate Hobbs? How would you rate Realm of the Elderlings so far?
I absolutely adore Realm of the Elderlings. I think after Farseer, I understand why people like Hobb. I'm not sure it will be a favorite. And then I read Live Ship and I was like, this is my favorite writer. Like, it completely shifted how I viewed Hobb. And it was very much a, oh, I get it moment reading Live Ship. And then Tawny Man has kind of continued that, where Fool's Errand is better than, it's probably on par with Royal Assassin, in my opinion, like those two, but it's better than the trilogy. Like, so far I felt like Tawny Man is a much stronger trilogy.
And
And
Farseer.
so, yeah. And
Okay.
so Hobb has very much cemented herself as one of my favorite writers, if not my favorite writer, that I just get excited to pick up every time.
Wow, that's high praise. Yeah. It sounds like we had a similar experience with Farseer and Live Ship, because I said many times that I made a video on Farseer when I started my channel, because I was like, my idea, which was at the time, actually, I didn't know it was a really good idea for a Booktube channel, but I decided I'll just make a bunch of videos on what I consider to be great fantasy reads, and I'll call it the best of fantasy or something. And then I made I made one on the Farseer trilogy. Why? I would do the same thing every time. Why blank is among the best of fantasy. So I did that for Farseer. So obviously it impressed me. But Live Ship Traders was the one that was like, whoa, okay, yeah, she's like top 3 fantasy writer for me at this point after reading the Live Ship Traders trilogy. So it's very similar to what you experienced.
Yeah, it seems like that's a general consensus at a point. I know there are like that. There's the Fitz. Like that's their favorite, like and I appreciate those people. I'm scared of them at the same time, but anyone whose like favorite character is Fitz, I'm like, I don't want to know your past, because it's gonna reveal a lot, if you get what I mean. Whereas I feel like I'm much more of a Live Ship, I'm much more of a Live Ship person.
Yeah. Although I hear the tetralogy, the Rainwild Chronicles, is almost always the least favorite of the Realm of the Elderlings fans, like pretty universal. I've never met someone who said Rainwild Chronicles is my favorite of the whole thing. Have you ever met someone who said that?
No, I don't think I have. I think they may be silenced. I'm not sure. There could be a couple out there, but I think they're generally shouted out of the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm actually curious to read Rainwild Chronicles, because I'm like, really? I mean, I've never heard anyone say, oh, it's just awful either. It's just the pretty universally the least favorite among the whole Realm of the Elderlings. But so I'm curious myself, like, okay, what does he do differently in the Rainwild Chronicles that makes it the least favorite for many people? But Tawny, man, I hear nothing but people gushing about. And then there's the last trilogy, which everyone seems to adore. So, yeah.
Yeah, I know. I saw Robin Hobb has been tweeting in the vicinity of finding a new idea for a story, and that she's now writing that. And so I keep on, anytime I see a tweet, I'm like, I can't wait for in 2 years when there's an announcement. That's my
in the Realm of the Elderlings, or just some separate thing?
I'm not sure, because she writes as I think she began writing again as Megan Lindholm as well, so I think it could be anything. But I just saw her tweet where she was like, I'm ignoring Twitter because a story's found me and I'm just going to follow that for now. And I'm like, that is exciting.
That's very exciting. Yeah, she's actually normally fairly active on social media. I've had a couple Realm of the Elderlings related tweets in the past that she's liked. I'm like, wow, Robin Hobb liked my tweet, So she's aware, I guess. But now we can expect her to be less present, perhaps, because she is pursuing a story, as she says. Yeah.
We can certainly hope so. I wouldn't mind a bit of silence on Twitter for a book at the end of it.
I think it's a fair exchange. Yeah. Yeah. Well, so you didn't start out as a Realm of the Elderlings fan when you were a wee lad. So I would like to ask you the standard question here on Dear Dr. Fantasy and get a sense of just who you are, Ben, because you are what you read. So what have been some of the formative reads of your life? What have been some of the important things, the important stories that you would call life-changing, or that directed the course of your existence, or something along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, I think after watching the other episodes, I'm going to echo a lot of people in terms of like Johann and that type of thing.
Yeah.
Like as a child, I was a big Roald Dahl fan. My dad used to read me Roald Dahl.
That probably explains a lot of things, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And there's also my dad used to read me The Magic Faraway Tree and things like that. Some Enid Blyton and that type of I don't know, it's very quintessential British childhood. stories.
Yeah.
And then coming out of that, when I started reading for myself, I feel like everyone, there's the Harry Potter, but I don't actually remember reading Harry Potter.
Oh,
I know I have, and I remember elements of it, but it's not like seared into my memory.
okay.
Whereas like I feel like I just read the same books over and over, and it was very much Roald Dahl. I read Roald Dahl, weirdly enough, like way too long, even though it passed like the reading age. I'd be like, man, I just want to read Fantastic Mr. Fox right now. And then
I mean, I would do that too. So
yeah. And then the one that really sticks up to me was my brother gave me the Mistborn trilogy.
Okay.
And I was, I think 12 turning 13. I just started secondary school, and my brother had bought them because he liked the artwork. That was the only reason he bought all the trilogy, and was just like, I like the artwork, I'm buying them. And it's when he first went to university, and so when he came back, he'd read them and he just gave them to me. It was like, you have to read these, and then when I come back we can talk about them. And so I absolutely loved Mistborn trilogy. It was I got through them so quickly, and then that really cemented like fantasy in my head. I wasn't still an active reader in a sense. Like I was reading, but I was very like spacious in what I was reading. I was kind of just picking up whatever. But I always facilitated around fantasy because growing up being shown Lord of the Rings and that type of thing, I never read the books when I was a kid. I'd read The Hobbit, but I've been shown the film so many times, and I loved those films so much that I was like, there's got a sword in it, I'm gonna read the book. And then following Mistborn, I was probably then about 14, and I wanted to watch Game of Thrones. And my mum was like, you're not watching Game of Thrones, you're too young for it, you're not watching it. And I was like, well, can I read the books? And my mum was like, yeah. And I don't understand how that was the answer.
Had she read the books?
No, she had. It was very much
that's like, why. So
yeah. But it was funny, like she's like, you can't watch the show because it's got too much violence and too much sexual content, but you can read the books that it's based on. Like surely it's going to have the same content. But I don't know. I think it was just a way of keeping me quiet. And they thought, if he's reading, that's probably better than watching.
Books are good for you, right? So I mean,
exactly, yeah. And so and then I read the Song of Ice and Fire that's out, and it was I remember, I think my most vivid memory reading before like starting Booktube and everything was the reading The Red Wedding. And and it was, I was having my mum had just called me saying that dinner was ready. I think I was about 15, and I was just at the climactic moment, and I had to be like, Mum, no, I can't right now, I have to read, and tell her that I couldn't come down for dinner. And I just remember reading that and then coming down, my food was cold and I just didn't care, and I was like, you're not gonna believe what just happened, Mum, and trying to explain to her.
So you had to go through the Red Wedding and then eat a cold dinner. Oh,
exactly. I know. What a sad life. But it's for some reason for such a grim dark world, I have such a wholesome relationship with it because of reading it in my childhood and having like that moment of like my mum kind of being like, oh, go on then, and that type of thing. That strangely enough, A Song of Ice and Fire is a wholesome memory.
Wow. Well, so you have a cool older brother and a sort of a parental lapse, if you will, to blame for your love of fantasy, I guess.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Which, strangely enough, I believe is how almost all British personalities are formed, by parental lapses and an older influence. That's how we all become who we are.
There's probably some real wisdom into that statement, I would guess. So, yeah.
And then, I mean, after that, I think that was pretty much after that. I then I read Animal Farm a lot. I was a big Orwell
cool. Yeah, I'm a big advocate of 1984. I think everyone should read it. But
yeah, I actually I won't go on to that now, but I just had to reread it, and I'm going to do an essay on it in January.
On 1984.
Yeah. I'm looking
Oh.
at the architecture of 1984.
Oh, wow.
yeah.
Sorry, I said that.
Yes, now my brain's going to be spiraling into the essay I need to write. But
Yeah.
I read Animal Farm a lot. I read just a strange, like an array of just random things. Nothing really stuck in a way. And I think that led to me, I stopped reading just before I went to university. I was doing A level, which is the equivalent of, I don't know what that is in America. Like
How old were you? A level.
I was 16, so I just finished our traditional. We have GCSEs, which is like what I imagine high school is, and then you have a little bit before going to university, which is A level.
Yes, I'm familiar with the system because I have relatives over there,
Mm.
and I've lived places that have modeled their education systems sort of off of the British one. So here, I mean, at that age, you'd still be in what we call high school. You'd be a junior in high school or 11th grade. And then you have one more grade of high school, 12th grade, and then you go to college or university. So
yeah. So I just done. I finished my GCSEs, so I went into A level, and I chose English, and I did English language, and my teacher was just really. I've never heard someone hate English as much as they did whilst teaching it. And it was probably about half the class dropped the course, including me. I was like, I don't want to do English anymore. I hate this. Like, I hate English, and I quit.
A teacher who made you hate the subject they were teaching.
Exactly. Yeah. It was. The guy retired the year after I dropped the course, so I think it was very much like I don't care anymore.
Well, he should have retired probably a little sooner.
Yeah. So I dropped English, and I was like, I'm going to be a musician. I'm going to be a cool musician. And
nice.
So
Wait, what do you play? What music?
I play bass.
Okay.
And then I like messed around with production stuff on computers and that type of thing. So I stopped doing English in 2017 when I was about 17, and went to university. I studied music technology for a year, decided I didn't want to do that, left university, did whatever until COVID hit, and then I picked up Stormlight Archive. I thought I'd go back and read the Brandon Sanderson that I didn't know, and then so I picked up that, and then I read all 3 of those books. Well, at the time it was only 3.
Right.
Rhythm of War wasn't out, and then I just started picking up more. I read like Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. I read The Witcher, and then it just started from there. Rather than just sticking to Brandon Sanderson, like I had been doing up until that point and reading a couple of other things, I tried to like branch out, and then it all just stuck, and I just completely fell in love with it, and then decided I wanted to study again.
Cool. So that reading fantasy brought you back to university?
Yeah, exactly. So because I'd always enjoyed it. It's strangely enough, I think my great aunt is the reason I came back to university, because I started reading fantasy again, and I was having all these ideas and everything, trying to dig into the thematics of the books I was reading, because I'd always enjoyed actually analyzing literature and everything. And then it was when I went to see my great aunt, and she was like, you should read Persuasion by Jane Austen, and you should read Middlemarch. And I read both.
Middlemarch is brilliant. Yeah.
And I read both of those when I stayed with her. I stayed with her for about 3 weeks, and I read both of those, and I was like, I think I could go back to university and do this.
Cool. So wait, you're an English major again?
Yeah. So so I now do. It's a partial course. It's just a bracket of English. So we do both literature and language.
Nice.
And so I'm now in my second year doing that. And
awesome. So for the language part, do you learn Old English and Middle English?
No, it's more more like
too bad.
It's very much. Last year we looked at The Handmaid's Tale, and we were looking at like the idea of like what type of metaphors, foregrounding, etc., like the language devices. And then this year we applied that to financial crime and that type of thing, and how some people can be perceived as victims, whereas some people are perceived as like it was a malicious thing, etc., and how it's looking into class differences and that type of thing. So it's very interesting, but I don't think I'm the best at language. I'm much better at literature.
So it's the literature part that gets you going.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, that's fantastic. Great story. You know, Ben, it's so interesting because this is the 28th episode, and I have noticed a pattern. And I'm not trying to say that everybody's, devoid of free will and that we all have the same pattern, but I have noticed quite a lot of people with a similar pattern right around that same age. Like they were readers when they were kids, readers into their maybe even teenage years, and then university. And then, of course, they stopped reading for pleasure because I guess we get busy, right? And we're trying to figure out who we are and what we're going to do with the rest of our lives, and we're, all this studying. And so many people tell me, yeah, I just kind of stopped reading fantasy when I was in college, and then I rediscovered it later on. And that has happened so many times that I've heard that. So I guess it's because we get busy, or is that just a certain period when we're less receptive, or what do you think that is?
I'm not sure. I think it's maybe it's probably the pivotal time where you're probably judged more for it. There's like a sense of forced, like you're like, when there's the idea of you're growing into the person you're going to be, there's the idea of like, I think there's an idea of like evolution or transition there. And that you kind of have to, you're like, I'm not a child anymore. I need to cut something out. And like the easiest thing to do is to be like, I'm not going to read fantasy anymore. I'm going to read big boy books. And then you pick up a traditional literature and you're like, this is so dry. I don't want to read this. And then you just stop reading. And then I think that like when you come back to it, it's like it's then the idea of recapturing that, where you're like, man, remember when I used to read and was really happy? I want to read that again. And I think I was lucky to have that early. I had that because I'd left university.
Yeah, you came back earlier than most people do.
Yeah, like I think I was 22 where I decided to pick up Stormlight Archive. So and I was at a point where I could go back to university at 23. So I'm technically a mature student, but I'm still very much just I think I'm just lucky enough to appreciate that I get to just read all day. And that's technically me doing a good job. I get to be like, I read 150 pages today, and that's all I had to do, and I just had to think about it.
And you're mature, so it's a win-win, right?
It's why I make the videos. It's to let out the immaturity, so I can be a reasonable human being in real life.
Yeah, well, that's great. I mean, I personally never stopped reading fantasy. Probably because I was oblivious and didn't care that I was a complete geek, and just kept reading, Tolkien and stuff when I was in college. But it is a pattern, and it's interesting that I think I like your explanation too, that people get more self-conscious and they think, oh, I'm supposed to be adult now. I'm supposed to be serious. But my contention is that fantasy, and I suspect you'll agree with me, fantasy delivers much of the same important stuff that the serious literature deliver. It can. I mean, it's a perfectly capable vessel, a vehicle for getting us to think about the big themes, like why we're here and what are we supposed to do with ourselves, why we're here, where are we going, and that sort of thing. I think fantasy actually has some advantages in delivering those kinds of experiences to people. So, I don't think there's ever a need to, and it's a shame though, because you do have a lot of serious authors who will crap all over fantasy. Oh, that's genre fiction. So it's a shame that exists. And as an academic, I'm especially upset by academics who are dismissive of what they would look down on as genre fiction, mere genre fiction. When really there are people you can find people writing fantasy who are just as talented as anyone writing literary fiction, I think. So, like Robin Hobb, for example.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to see the difference in terms of that it didn't used to be that way. At least from how I view it, when you see like Le Guin be lauded as like just a fantastic writer that isn't limited by writing genre fiction, writing sci-fi fantasy, but then you see Hobb, who has very Le Guin-esque writing, and is hitting a lot of the same thematic work that Le Guin is, but doesn't have that same like it seems like we've created a box around fantasy since then, that I wish, it seems like rather than trying to break free of that, part of me thinks that some parts of the fantasy community are helping build that wall because they want to stay inside of it.
Maybe.
And I think it's a simultaneous thing rather than one side judging the other. I think they're both very combative at the moment. Like the idea of someone that just reads fantasy but wouldn't want to pick up a Salman Rushdie book or something. I'm like, there's so much shared history and so much shared viewpoints that I think they both have.
Yeah, well, and I think it's a great example because I would even argue that Salman Rushdie does write fantasy, although he wouldn't say that. He would say, no, it's magic realism. But that's interesting. That I think you're probably right that it's not just people outside fantasy judging fantasy. Sometimes, and maybe often, it's people within fantasy resisting the literary fiction for whatever reasons too. But it's a shame because there's loss really if you decide, oh, that's not for me, then you've closed yourself off from a whole lot of really wonderful experiences, as a fantasy reader, I think, and aspiring writer, I think it's important to read outside of fantasy too, that's really important. But yeah, I mean, there are so many of these writers like Le Guin, you gave a great example there, who actually has sort of made her way into the more serious side of fiction, because you'll find her in some of her short stories might be in an anthology, in a textbook for a intro to literature class. Neil Gaiman is another one. You'll find, he's sort of shaded a little bit into respectability, so you'll find fantasy authors who do that, and they're sort of in this weird space in between the genre and the more serious magic realism or whatever. Whereas you'll have your Salman Rushdies who will insist, no, I'm just magic realism. I don't really have anything to do with that fantasy stuff, So, and I think that sort of reaction on authors like his part, and he's not the only one. There's plenty of other examples. Handmaid's Tale you mentioned, I think, right? Yeah. I mean, she also has been very outspoken about, oh, no, I don't write genre fiction, So there are
speculative.
It's speculative fiction, that's a little more, excuse me, it's speculative fiction. I think that those authors are coming from a place where they want their work to be taken seriously, and they feel like if they have that label, that genre fiction label, people are not going to take them seriously. So they're studiously avoiding any taint, I suppose.
Yeah, I think so as well. I also it's just sad because especially I don't want to, well, it's like the difference between, I always feel weird when Atwood is so heavily lauded and then you've got like Octavia Butler just kicked to the side, and I'm like, Octavia Butler writes a better Handmaid's Tale than Margaret Atwood did. Like, she writes a better story around those things than Margaret Atwood does, and that's why I personally, I read the first 150 pages of the Testaments and then I put it down and I will never pick it up again, because it was when it was the naming devices for me. Like, they're so on the nose and they're so just it was when I read The Underground Female Road, I thought, this is wild that you have put this in a book and don't feel the need to elaborate on that. You're just like, this is here. But Margaret Atwood is I still think The Handmaid's Tale is a fantastic book, but I'm not sure about Margaret Atwood as a person.
Yeah, I mean, it saddens me when talented authors like her and Salman Rushdie very publicly try to distance themselves from what other people do in a way that makes it feel like, no, what I do is superior to what other people are doing. And it's not that I don't recognize that there are variations in let's say, complexity. Okay. I think that's a good way to say it non-judgmentally, is that, yes, there are certain authors will weave themes into their stories very deliberately in a way that is more complex than the way that other authors do. But it's not like you can take a knife and just chop, this is magic realism, this is fantasy. The fact is, with a lot of really great authors like Ursula Le Guin and Neil Gaiman, they bleed into each other. I don't think that Neil Gaiman sits down and says, is what I'm about to write, is it magic realism or is it fantasy? I'm really not sure, he just writes, that's what he does. He just tries to tell a great story that draws from the fantastic, right?
Yeah, I don't think there's a part where he sits down and goes, is the unicorn in Stardust too much? I'm not sure. He just puts the unicorn in.
Pretty much. He's not worried about, am I going to be slapped with the label genre fiction because of the unicorn, right? Yeah.
I think it's the same as like with YA, etc. Like the idea of like trying to. I haven't read his Dark Materials, but I know that was a foundation, at least in England, for like the creation of the YA genre. Was, well, this is a fantasy book, but it's about a child, but we don't quite. And it's like reading it. Like I've known my housemate read it, and he's like, for a YA, it's such a dry read because it's not a children's book in a lot of ways.
It really isn't
at all. Yeah, but for some reason it created that we don't know where to put this, so let's just create its own thing. And it's the same thing there. It's like a forced delineation for marketing purposes that has absolutely no meaning.
I mean, who thought it was a good idea to market a trilogy with an allusion to Milton in the title as YA? I mean, come on, what is wrong with it's not really a children's trilogy at all, in my opinion. It just happens to have a protagonist who is a child. And my older daughter read it when she was probably around 12, I guess. And I read it along with her and loved it. But I couldn't help but think she's reading it on one level and I'm reading it on a different level, which is, that's a talented author who can pull that off too, really, is that he's written something that any adult can read and get a lot out of. That trilogy, starting with The Golden Compass. It's brilliant stuff. And if we're going to call it YA, then it's, in my opinion, maybe the best YA of all time. But I mean, you're right. I mean, I'm not sure about that. I always thought that was Harry Potter that sort of kind of made the YA label a thing, I guess, because then a lot of people wanted to, we need to do that. And then they wanted to market, they want to replicate the Harry Potter experience, which has never been done, really. But I feel like the YA label evolved. Maybe it was around before Harry Potter, I don't know. But I feel like it sort of happened because of Harry Potter.
Yeah, because I only think it's not too much difference between Golden Compass and Philosopher's Stone. I think it's like 3 years, is it, or something like that?
I know that one is 90. It was we call it the Sorcerer's Stone, of course, over on this side of the pond. But I think it was 97, maybe something around there. And I'm not even sure when the Golden Compass was published, but someone in the comments can tell us, or we can look it up. But yeah, they're probably around the same time. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
But it's I'm trying to think of what else would be in my reading. I mean, now everything that I've read is documented pretty much on the Booktube channel.
Yes, but tell us about some of the series that, since you've been doing Booktube, have been what you would consider to be very impactful, or that are changing you as a person, your perspective on literature, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I mean, we've already spoken about Robin Hobb, and that was the first time reading Robin Hobb was the first time I spoke to Grace. Was that we decided we were going to read Assassin's Apprentice together.
Oh, cool.
And then, we had our first discussion after reading that, and we didn't talk about the book at all. And that's when we were like, oh, maybe we're just interested in each other. So, so Robin Hobb, maybe that's why I love Robin Hobb. It's like a sentimental element. But
I'm sorry, that is just so sweet. I cannot help but pause and just bask in the glow of what you said. I mean, that is just so sweet and wonderful. And I'm just kind of having a hard time moving on from that. But congratulations. Yeah, and books can bring us together in the most wonderful ways, right?
Absolutely. I think, I mean, I have all my favorites next to me, like on the one that's available to like see on camera.
Perfect.
Abercrombie is another one. The First Law. I read that. That was before I made the Booktube channel. Actually, I read the first trilogy, and I remember reading The Blade itself, loving that, and I didn't really have anything to compare it to because I was so kind of green with it. And then reading the second one, and I don't want to give any spoilers away, but there's something that happens in the latter half that completely changed how I viewed what you could do with it, where it was kind of just the expectation subversion that is, of course, throughout the whole series, but there's just a massive one that happened. I remember being disappointed and going, oh, and then being like, that is absolute genius to do that.
And it's good that you went from oh to oh, that is genius, because a lot of people just stop at oh, you know.
Yeah. And I think it fits with the whole world is fantastic. I'm up to The Age of Madness, so I've got the final trilogy to read. I'm going to hopefully read that next year.
Oh, nice. That's the best, in my opinion. The Age of Madness. Abercrombie at his best.
Yeah, one of the most underrated elements of Abercrombie to me is his epitaphs, his quotes before the parts begin. I love all of those so much, and I think Before They Are Hanged is such as like it's such a key piece in how I like my evolution to being like, oh, I enjoy reading fantasy too. I love it, and I'm going to pursue it. Was just reading the quote, we must forgive our enemies, but not before they are hanged, is such a wonderfully twisted quote. And I don't remember who it is. It's like a German poet, I think. And I just remember that also introduces the intertextual elements that a lot of, like, if we're talking about when you're at university, they constantly talk about, look at the intertextual, how do things relate? It's like, fantasy has that if you're looking for it. And like, it opens up your eyes to other forms of literature that you may not look at. So Abercrombie's definitely another one. And then I think Pratchett fills out that the kind of Mount Rushmore for me of fantasy writers. We've got Hobb, Abercrombie, Sanderson, and Pratchett.
Okay. I would replace our 4 presidents with those 4. I definitely, I'd love to see them up there.
Well, I think if you send an email, we can get it started. We can
start a petition.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure we'll at least have like 3 people. If anything, we'll probably spawn 5,000 different petitions of people.
Yeah, that's the problem. No, I need Erickson up there. No,
that's true. I completely forgot about Erickson. I think when I finish Malazan, he may kick Sanderson off, but I don't want to face that yet.
Okay.
I don't want to face it yet. But yeah, Pratchett's unrivaled for me. He brings such a unique sense of self through his writing. I like Abercrombie's the only person that I think has the same level of individuality in their prose that just shines through, and no matter what, I can pick up and be like, this is their book.
Yes.
And I read I read Going Postal first, which is an underappreciated gem in Discworld. I think it's still actually one of my favorites. Because you can read it as a standalone. You don't have to worry about the implication of like, oh, I'm starting the Guard series, so I've got 7 books or something. You can just read Going Postal and go, I love it. There we go.
Though, I have the feeling I've only read 4 Discworld books so far, and I will read each individual series in the correct order. Don't worry, I'm not going to be, getting myself in trouble here. But I still feel like every Discworld book is kind of a standalone too.
Absolutely, yeah. I do agree. Yeah, I think it's more like the perception going in, if you get what I mean. Like when you hear, oh my god, there's 42 books or something, and then and then it's like, oh, they're split into subsections. You're like, oh, okay, I want to read the Guard series, and it's like there's 8 books in that, and you're like, oh, but I think like the perception going in is it's scary, but then when you actually pick them up, you're like, oh, okay, I can just dot around. And Going Postal is the most conventional that Pratchett gets, because it has chapters. It's like a subversion on the hero's journey. In terms of like the progression that we're following. Firstly, Moist von Litvig is just one of the greatest character names that's ever existed. And yeah, it's just him he is a charlatan, he is a thief and everything. And the concept is he gets given the post office, rather than being hanged, he's like, you can either be hanged or you can look after the post office. And so he has to use his kind of sly ways to restart the post office. And it's just also quintessentially British.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, it's Going Postal. I think it's my favorite Discworld book after reading about 12 to 15 now. I think it's still there.
Cool.
So yeah, I think that rounds up. I mean, yeah, Erikson. We haven't spoken about Erikson.
You can.
Yeah, I'm 3 books in. I have.
Okay. You finished Memories of Ice.
I did finish Memories of Ice, and Memories of Ice was every book I think is amazing, and then I read the next one, like, well, at least for the first 3, and it recontextualizes. Oh, like, if this was that brilliant, then how is it better than what I thought was already brilliant? And so yeah, Memories of Ice. I know that's meant to be one of the best in the series.
Right, it is a favorite of a lot of Malazan fans. That is true.
Memories and I can certainly understand why, because I think it's the first example of a real, like, the payoff for the series, in terms of returning to certain people and getting culminations to some things that are set up previously. That I think it's the same as, for example, with Words of Radiance, where Words of Radiance is paying off for a lot of things set up in Way of Kings. That it's viewed as an even greater payoff because you've had to wait for that next book.
Yeah, wait till you get to the crippled god.
yeah. It's such a it's a book that it's a series that simultaneously it does scare me until I pick up the book, and then I'm like, oh, no, I know where I am. I may not know everything that's happening, but I can understand the journey that I need to go on now. And so I feel like it's like everything. There's a sense of the fear of dipping in and getting lost. But I don't think, maybe I just maybe it's because I do enjoy like Salman Rushdie books and things like that I'm more willing to be lost and then trust that the author's going to put me together. Erikson's prose as well is incredible.
I would say you're probably very well equipped to read Malazan, and there's nothing to worry about. If you're somebody who likes to read literary fiction, a lot of what we fantasy readers perceive as different about Malazan isn't so different if you've read a lot of literary fiction. So I think Erikson would be the first to say, well, I mean, maybe what I'm doing is a little bit unusual in fantasy, but it's not unusual if you're just looking at literature in a broader sense. So I think that's probably a lot of the difficulty that many people have, is they have these fantasy expectations and Malazan doesn't fit them because Erikson is doing something a bit different, which is more common in general in just literature, broadly speaking. But he's also out to subvert some tropes too, and that can be disruptive for some people who love their tropes. So
yeah. Well, it's like I feel like reading Erikson, this is going to be a very strange like, I feel like people watching this go, what are you talking about? The idea of being lost in Malazan reminds me, for instance, of like reading something like Beloved by Toni Morrison, where it's just, like, outside of fantasy, it is so typical to have normally it's a non-linear fashion in literary fiction, the kind of that aspect, whereas this is more spatial and lack of information, creating that, like, kind of creating the same feeling of confusion. But yeah, like Beloved's non-linear sense, and then like the supernatural elements kind of feels the same for me, where it's kind of, you just have to read and trust that the illusions will be brought together and you'll be able to connect the pieces.
That's exactly right.
And I think Malazan's a series that I want to continue so badly, but I always feel like I have to take a big break in between.
That's
And then
actually fairly common too. A number of people I've talked to experience it that way. In fact, the majority, I would say, there are those who just plow through all 10 books and then that's great. But most people I talk to are like, that book, I loved it, but it took a lot out of me. So I need a little bit of something else. I need some Dresden Files or something, you know.
Yeah, watching when Joanna read them all back to back, I just remember being so impressed. And I was like, I don't know how you actually did that. Because there is a
Jimmy too. Jimmy was like boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, there's just such a weight to them that I personally have to dip away for a while. But I do think I do that with everything. I have started so many series that I'm about 4 or 5 books in, and I just then pick them up as I go along whenever I feel like it.
Yep.
And like there are some that I've put away for now that I'm kind of like, I'm going to come back to it. Like The Dark Tower, I read the first 2.
Okay.
I loved them, but then I was kind of in the feeling of I don't want to feel like I'm getting a lesser experience because I've taken such a large break.
Yeah.
And then so I had to kind of choose, and I felt like I'd rather, for instance, read Hobb, finish that, and then move on to a different series. So I feel like now that I've read a wide range, I'm now picking what I want to focus on.
Yeah, I took about 2.5 years to get through all the Dark Tower books. So it was definitely, I'm like you, I'll read a Dark Tower book and then a Dresden Files, and then I'll read something by Mark Lawrence, and then, you know, whatever. I just, you know, I don't read just one series straight through. Usually I'm going all over. And I think that helps me to stay invested in my reading. That's I guess a strategy of mine to keep myself from getting into any kind of slump, is to just keep switching around in series. So it's pretty rare for me to read only like back-to-back one series. In fact, I don't know if I've ever even done that on this channel.
That's what I always do find it impressive, because it's so antithetical to how my brain works. Because I even feel it now. I'm really glad that Fool's Fate is so good, because we've read them so close to each other that I'm kind of like, I would love to read something else. Like I know I'm reading Game of Thrones next month.
Oh, cool. Are you a part of that read along that's happening?
Nice. I'm gonna. I've been wanting to reread them for a long time. And so I've been trying to nag Grace for a long time. And it finally, because she read them as well around the same time that I did when we were kids. Like when we lined up, we read them.
So her parents had a lapse too then?
Evidently, yeah. So I think we're reading it together, and then we're going to be part of that read along. So I'm very much looking forward to that, because like I said, it's such a seminal series in my brain that I don't remember large parts of it, because it was so long ago. I mean, I'm not talking a long time ago, but in terms of the span of my life,
it's been
like
of your
8
life.
years is like a third of it. So it's been a while.
No, I would join you all, but I've actually read a Game of Thrones probably 5 times at least already. And the rest of the books I've read at least twice. So, you know.
Yeah. Did you say, because I think you said that you taught that also?
It was part of my fantasy novels course.
I remember you saying that. So yeah, that definitely makes sense that you've read it a fair amount to not have to retread.
Yeah. It's, I mean, I didn't mind reading it that many times because I like it that much. But yeah, so you've got a lot to look forward to here. I think I will be very curious to hear your take on Age of Madness to finish up the First Law stuff that Abercrombie's done, because in my opinion, it is the very best of what Abercrombie has written so far. At least I haven't read anything other than his First Law stuff. So I haven't read the other trilogy he did that sometimes people call YA. Again, there's one of those, is it really YA? And I think Abercrombie doesn't really think of it as YA himself, but it got that label, so whatever. But I just love Age of Madness because I think he does a brilliant job with the incorporation of theme in there. He still does, of course, his awesome character work, and talk about a distinctive voice. I mean, that guy's, you're reading Abercrombie when you're reading Abercrombie, and you know which character's talking when you're reading Abercrombie. And his best female characters by far are in Age of Madness, in my opinion. So yeah, good
Yeah,
stuff.
because yeah, that's the thing I find impressive about Abercrombie, is that not only can you tell it's him, but reading a person's narration, you can tell what character it is. It's just so unbelievably impressive.
Yeah. And he works hard on that. I know I've heard him talk about how much he has to go back and edit until he gets that voice. So it's not something that just like, you know, oozes off of him, you know. It's
you
really
put him Dr. Mash that morning, and
yeah. So he works hard at that. He's a crafts person in that sense. Have you read any Mark Lawrence yet?
no, I have not. It's someone that's always on the periphery, but I haven't actually got to yet.
Because based on what your taste and what you've told me so far you like, I have a sneaking suspicion you would enjoy some Mark Lawrence. But he's one of my favorites for sure. And he's one of the few that I would compare to Abercrombie in terms of wit. Not so much in Broken Empire, which is maybe his most famous, but it's not necessarily a characteristic of the rest of his work, which is a shame because a lot of people have a hard time with Broken Empire. It is grimdark. It is grimdark, and it's very tough to read because the protagonist is a villain, an outright villain, and does some awful things. And some people are like, I just can't read this, you know, and they assume the rest of Lawrence's writing is like that, but it's really not. Red Queen's War trilogy is actually it's still got some grim stuff in it, but the protagonist is really funny, and in my opinion, is just a really interesting character, very different from Jalan is his name. He's very different from Jorg, who is the protagonist of Broken Empire. And then I'm reading right now and finishing, actually, I'm in the third book of the Book of the Ancestor, which is, again, tonally different in some ways from the other trilogies of his that I've read. So he does something a little different in each one, but he's got this great sense of humor. He loves to play around with chronology. And that's something you mentioned earlier as well. He'll do a lot with flashbacks or you know, just kind of coming back and forth. I find that refreshing and kind of cool. And he can, I think, increase your investment in the story by doing that very skillfully. So I really, that's a sort of a hallmark of his too, is that he likes to play with chronology. And just he has a great sense of humor. The guy's got a great sense of humor. Plus, for me anyway, I think he is a great writer in terms of that balance between entertainment, but also introducing really cool themes. Like nobody does a better job of talking about friendship than Mark Lawrence, in my opinion. So I think you would enjoy his books.
Yeah, I think from what you've just said, I think so as well. It's strange. It's I don't know. It's just, maybe it's because it's not one of those series that created, because maybe it's because it was already out, but it doesn't have that sense of I'm a big victim of like FOMO. I'm a big victim of the fear of missing out.
That urgency that, oh, I have to read Rhythm of War because everybody's reading it right now. Yeah.
It's actively what I'm having to step away from. I stepped away from it with Lost Metal. I've done a fantastic job of being like, I'm not the biggest Era 2 fan. I'm just going to get to it when I get to it, and taking that step back. And I've done the it's like the same with what's the Empire of Silence. There's so many people talking about that, and I want to read it so bad. But like, I'm already committed now to certain things that I just need to let it go. It turns out well for me, I won't lie. So because I read the Long Price Quartet because of that. Alan's propaganda machine.
The Alan hype machine. Yeah.
And I absolutely adore that series more, like, so much. And then
I do too. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah. And then the same with Long Price Quartet. In my Discord, there was so many people starting it at the same time. Grace was telling me that it was one of her favorite series, and it was just like, I just need to read it, because otherwise, and I love that series as well. So
wait, was it Alan or was it Grace who convinced you to read LPQ? Who was more influential in that decision?
It was definitely Alan, because once again, basically me and Grace read a lot of series together. So we read the Long Price Quartet together.
Okay.
And it was Alan, watching his videos, hearing him talk about being in the Discord. Like, at the time, it was such a it was when he first started talking about it, and we were all like, oh no. Okay. and so I'm now lucky enough to have gotten the all four omnibus, so I don't have mismatched
Nice.
copies that are
I
like.
had the mismatched
Yeah,
one.
I had that for a while, and then when I went to visit Grace, we went in and they just randomly had an omnibus in the bookstore, and I was like, I'm bagging that.
Nice. So has the Allen propaganda machine also thrown you into the books of Babel yet?
No, I do own the first one due
Okay.
to that.
Send when it sends.
Yeah, but it was one of those things where the hype train hit me and I bought it, and then the hype train hit Books of Babel, where people went, oh, the series didn't end quite the way I wanted it to, and it was very controversial. And I think that hit me where I was like, I'm definitely gonna, maybe I can leave this for a while. I think that's what happened.
No, Alan is gonna have a fit when he hears this.
I do definitely plan on reading it, because the way people describe it, I'm like, oh, this is written for me. Like because people describe the prose as very, I've heard the term like, oh, it's very literary, and like very prose central, and imagery and symmetry, and like thematic work and everything. So everything seems like it's for me, but I have not picked it up yet. Through it's also the I think it's the same as the Dark Tower, where it's like, oh, the first one's so thin, oh, it's such an easy read, and then you look at the other ones and they get bigger and bigger, and you're like,
yeah,
you can't do that to me. You can't throw an 800-page book at the end.
That's
Yeah,
sneaky, right?
Release 2 400-page books, please.
Here, start me. I'm just a little slim book here, and then book 7 is like blah,
Yeah.
That's sneaky.
So yeah, but I haven't started. Have you? I actually don't know whether you've read Send in the Sense yet.
No, I haven't, and I have promised Alan that I'm going to talk with him about the Books of Babel when I read that. So probably early-ish next year. I have several series I need to start. I'm finishing up a few right now. Like I said, Mark Lawrence's Book of the Ancestor. I'll be finishing R. Scott Baker's Prince of Nothing trilogy after that. And then I got a bunch that I promised that I'm going to start, and they include Books of Babel, but I've also going to try out, let's see, what was his name? Gene Wolfe, the Book of the New Sun. Yep. So I got to start that. I promised I would read the Greenbone Saga. So there's another one I got to start. And I already mentioned Realm of the Elderlings, so I'm going to be doing Tawny Man for sure. What else? There was another one that I know I'm going to be starting. I can't remember. Yeah, I'm missing a couple. So I've got a bunch that I got to start, in other words. And I'll be reading them probably, concurrently, switching between series like I usually do. So.
Well, yeah, if you wouldn't mind, I'll throw my hat in to read the Books of Babel alongside you whenever you get to them.
Nice. Okay. Then, cool. Yeah.
And then that will make me a very a positive person for all the people that tell me to read it. I actually, I also was extremely bad because I put out like, help me with what series I should read next.
Yeah.
And I read the first couple that won. But then Books of Babel was high up there as well, and I have not read that one yet. So I know the people that watch my channel wanted me to read it.
Okay, well, make it official then. You and I are going to be doing a Books of Babel read along, and we're going to force Alan to talk to us.
Yes, that sounds like a fantastic plan.
Okay, good. It's written in stone now.
Set in stone, absolutely.
Yep. So we'll doing that. Let's start in February, March. What do you think?
Yeah, that's fine by me. Okay. I'm very much down for that. Because I do think it's a series that I will very much enjoy, and at the very least, the last book will have a reaction. And I think sometimes, even if it's not your favorite, it's the most you can ask for is that you have a big reaction to something.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we might be in that group that the supporting Alan, saying this is the best book to finish the series. This is
very much.
Who knows? We might like it.
Maybe we'll look back on this and be like, why did we? Why have we done this to us?
What were we thinking? Yeah. No, I suspect I'm going to enjoy Bancroft's writing from what I've heard. I really do. So.
And he's signed on with, I don't remember what the publisher is, but he signed on for a new trilogy, I think, isn't he?
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah, after Books of Babel came out, because of the big kind of blow up that happened, he did sign with, I don't remember whether it's Tor or Orbit or something, but he does have a new trilogy signed.
Okay.
So no matter what, we're going to get more Bancroft.
And I think he started out self-publishing, right? Do I have that right?
So, yeah.
Yeah, Sam Ascens was initially self-published. Is that right?
I think so, which makes me think, well, actually, I was going to say that Orbit used to be the people that picked up
self-published authors.
Self-published, but then with Legends and Lattes, you've got Tor now picking people up, so maybe they've learned.
I think they're all getting onto that bandwagon. It's like, let's make the author do all the work, and
then we'll just
get the published, and then we'll just scoop them up and
absolutely. We'll make their cover glossy and we'll sell it. That's it.
Yeah, that seems to be the model. Now, what I'm wondering is, for now, it seems to be like the authors are ready to go along with that. But I'm wondering, will there come a time when an author who's self-published and successful gets an offer from a publishing house and is like, yeah, no, I think I'm better off on my own, but thank you, I wonder if that's going to happen, or if it probably has happened, I'm just not aware of it. I know that a lot of traditionally published authors are now going self-publishing. That's happening. Like, I'm hearing of that more and more now too. And I'm wondering why. Are they just like, no, I want more creative freedom, or I'm not happy with how much my books are being marketed, or what is driving that? I'm wondering.
Yeah, because I can imagine it from the perspective of writing that I understand. For me personally, if I self-published, I would want to, especially if you're, for instance, you're doing a trilogy, because the added support of editors and everything, that it is so beneficial.
It is hugely beneficial. What a publishing house can offer. Let's not ever underestimate that. That's true. Yeah.
And I think I understand now why. I understand why traditionally published would then go self-published, because they have created these contacts that the publishing houses provide and everything. So it's kind of a sense of, well, if I just put in a little bit more effort, the amount of money that I'm getting, if they have a pre-existing fan base and everything, they have the editors they can contact for freelance work, then you don't have to end up in a situation like what's happening with I forgot his name, Paolini at the moment, with the AI art, and suddenly like he's having to deal with the flack from his fan base for the fact that his cover is using AI art, but he didn't know about it or whatever.
Oh, I haven't heard about that.
Have you not? It's Tor Books put out a very bad statement that is getting quite a bit of flack at the moment, where so they used on the new Paolini book, it's got it's implementing AI art that has been kind of.
Is this a second sci-fi book? Is that?
Yeah, it's called Fractal Noise. I think it's in that fractal verse which the To Sleep and Sea of Stars was in. It's like but it's interesting because this one seems like it's more thriller, which is interesting to take a series and then do different genres within it. But it implemented AI art. But then
that's not Paolini's decision. That's Tor's decision.
No, exactly. But the audience is kind of like, this is your responsibility. You're the author, and so even
he almost has no say. He almost has. If I understand it correctly, he has almost zero say in the cover art.
Absolutely. And it's unfortunate to watch him have to deal with that. But then also Tor isn't helping, because Tor put out a statement where they said, we bought it from a reputable like kind of provider, and that we didn't know that they used AI art. We would 100% support creatives. However, we're going to use this cover because we would probably have to delay the book by a little bit of time, and we don't want to do that. So everyone is like, so you've admitted that what you did, whilst unintentional, was wrong, but you're not going to rectify it. And
wow, I hadn't heard about this.
Yeah, I saw there's been some fantastic reactions to it, such as Patrick from Patrick Leo.
Oh, what did he say?
He quote tweeted it with fractal noise question mark, more like rectal noise.
Whoa!
for Patrick as well, I was like, that's a real
that is salty Patrick right there.
And also, I
Oh,
saw, I think it was Holly Hart's books. She put AI must have written this apology because it's so bad, and so people aren't very happy with it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this, I'm with the people who are up in arms about the whole, I mean, it's an interesting discussion, first of all, the AI discussion, I guess, and this is the brouhaha of the day, I suppose, is AI. I did read an article, and I think it was in the Atlantic, that someone wrote, a teacher wrote about essays being written by AI, and apparently you shouldn't be writing all those essays while you're over the holidays. You should be having an AI write them for you, because now they can, they can
Yeah.
do essays now, I guess, and apparently maybe even write books. And of course, you hear more and more about the AI art and all of this. And my instinct is to feel very threatened by all of these developments, and to feel like, oh my God, this is not good. I mean, you're putting it's probably a little bit like how the Luddites felt when somebody invented mechanized looms and stuff, you know. It's like, oh no. Of course, a lot of people have been dealing with this in various realms, you know. People here in the United States and in manufacturing for years and years and years have been dealing with, you know, their jobs disappearing because of mechanization. So now we're going into more creative realms, though, like writing and art and stuff. And it feels like there's something so centrally human about these creative endeavors, that how could you have something that is not conscious in the way that we are? Or is AI conscious? I don't know. You know, if you're going to go that route, if you're going to say, well, what if AI actually is conscious enough? And then can we, you know, disparage the art being produced by AI, or the literature being produced by AI? It's a messy thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It's I struggle to like I'm in the same realm as you, where there's an aversion to it for me.
Yeah, it's my instinct is like, no, you know.
Yeah, exactly, because it already is so difficult to break into the creative realm, that to then have the added thing that a robot can create what you can create in an infinitesimal, is such a small period of time compared to what it takes an artist to create it.
I've been writing for 18 years. If some damn robot can spew out a novel in 5 minutes, I'm going to be a very sad man.
Yeah. It feels like it was nice when AI felt more like, I don't know if you've ever seen the clip from The Simpsons, where it's Burns has all the monkeys on the typewriters, and he's like, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, and he like hits the monkey. That was when AI was nice, where it was trying to model itself off us, but it wasn't quite there. Whereas now, when you're seeing this artwork, you're like, oh, some of it does look very good and way better. Especially for there's an element of, I don't want to disparage anyone, but sometimes when you see self-published novels where they've evidently made the cover themselves, and you kind of look at it and you're like, if you had a better cover, your writing's probably, it could be fantastic, but there's an element of how a cover looks that some people don't want to pick it up.
A bit too glossy, or a bit too,
or you know that you're using assets from like
I
clip
see,
not clip up, but like where you've
Photoshop,
got like a human model, etc. And it's kind of like
it looks a bit sterile.
And it's one of those where, for like the quality of covers for those are going to increase exponentially, because they're going to start using this stuff. And it's going to be a whole new barrel of fish on like Kindle Unlimited, where you've got all these popping up now.
Well, here's the thing, and I sympathize with especially self-published authors who are making this decision, because guess how much it costs to pay an artist to make a cover for you? And it's not cheap. We're talking in the thousands of dollars for one cover. So, you know, $3,000-$4,000 maybe. How many self-published authors can afford that? And when they're presented with, well, you could make this cool cover that looks really sleek with AI, I
Yeah.
love supporting art and independent artists and everything, but I can't afford, $3,000-4,000.
Yeah.
So, it's a tough one, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think it's one of those, I think it's very easy to condemn it without having to rely on it, if you get what I mean.
I do.
The
Yeah.
sense of, I mean, this is an argument I always go back to in terms of kind of rationalizing how some people view things, which is like, for instance, the idea of climate change. And I describe climate change as an inherently middle class issue, because there has to be a point of there's a point of comfortability where you can worry about the future. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people that are on the poverty line that cannot, they are worrying about living day to day, that they don't think about that difference. And I think that would be the same for some writers, where it's like,
Yeah.
I can't afford this, so I understand the issue, but I can't help it, and so they don't. And then maybe like the only thing I could think of is the idea that you use it for your first book, and then if that becomes successful, you then hire an artist for the second and third one, or say if you're doing a trilogy. But like that still doesn't help really. It's such
And
a
that's
difficult...
honestly the rare individual who actually make money from self-publishing.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
the exception, not the norm. Now, for the record, I am personally paying an artist for my books that I'm going to be publishing next year. I have an artist, I've engaged an artist. But I can afford it, so yeah. I'm not preaching. I'm just, that was a decision that I thought about for a millisecond, because I can afford it and I wanted to support an artist. And I feel like the cover I'll get will be unique because of that. And I'm excited about it. I'm excited that it will be obviously human produced art. I think people will recognize when they see the covers, this is very human. I wanted to go for something a little more abstract, a little more mythological on the cover. And I don't think AI does that yet. Or most of the AI art I've seen so far, it looks pretty uniform. It looks very sleek. It looks very polished. There's a kind of a almost robotic look to it, if I can say it that way. I have not investigated it thoroughly. So maybe we'll be seeing AI Monets next year, or AI Picassos, or whatever, so.
Yeah, it's I'm not sure. I think it's an issue that will look very different in like 2 years.
Yeah,
and I think it's like
I don't think. So who was I listening to recently about this? I was listening to somebody, and for some reason it's escaping my mind. I'm embarrassed because it was a fascinating conversation. Where was I? Oh, maybe it was Jimmy talking to Tad Williams last night. But the idea that AI is going to completely replace artists and writers, I don't think we need to worry about that, because that's where I was listening to this. It was Jimmy's discussion with Tad Williams on Chatting with Nuts. Tad Williams was saying how, people are always going to want the real thing. It's like, when ebooks were a thing, it was like everyone was saying, oh no, there will be no more physical books, they'll be gone. And and a certain number of people read ebooks, and that market seems to have kind of reached its peak, and books are still around. Physical books are still around. So people are probably going to will always want books written by humans and art produced by humans, most likely. It is exciting and interesting and controversial, I guess, right now, because it's new. But I don't know. I mean, I would hate to be, like I said, damn it, I've been working on this trilogy for 18 years. And just at the time I'm ready to publish, a bunch of AI robots, whatever, are going to just replace us all. So it's my timing again, but oh well. I don't think we have to worry too much.
No. I think it's the hot topic of the week.
Seems to be, yeah.
Very much like the only other piece of news, I don't even know whether this will register, for you personally, but there's the Warhammer TV show's been announced, and that's driven people insane.
Really? No, Warhammer is a gaming thing, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's the tabletop miniatures, but it's also there's
Or
like
the war. That's where the term grimdark came from originally, right?
yeah, exactly. And they've got the but there's the Black Library exists, which is like their publishing house, and they produce all these books.
Okay.
And so Henry Cavill's now been associated with this, and he's going to executive produce and create these shows.
Oh, now that he's not Superman or Geralt.
Exactly. Yeah. So it took a whole day for them to come out with a whole new universe he's creating. So
yeah,
it's and so yeah, that I've seen a lot to do with that in terms of I think it deals with the same thing, because it's being produced. It's not being produced, but it's being licensed by Amazon, and so I think it's one of those same instances of people are scared that it's going to tear the heart out of something. The same way with AI is like the idea of you can't get that human emotion, that like that connection you have of someone else creating it. And the same way that now Warhammer fans are seeing like how Rings of Power and Wheel of Time went, and they're just scared. I think people are just very scared all the time now about entertainment, because it's not been a good run for them. But
yeah, entertainment's a serious business, I guess, right?
Yeah, and but I do now, maybe that this is another example of FOMO. I've read one Warhammer book.
Okay.
It was actually very good. It was part of this series, which is it's called Cypher's Kane. It's not, I don't think that's how you pronounce this character, but it's this character who is in this uber masculine genocidal religious order that the Warhammer universe kind of revolves around. Cypher's Kane is a character who is also a charlatan. He is just trying to survive, and he keeps on finding himself in situations where he is lauded as the hero and given these promotions, but he's a coward. And I think that's a great introduction to the world, because it doesn't take it seriously. And it's actually it's well written as well.
Interesting.
And Warhammers are strange because it's so community based, and because the community are the ones that know it best. They get writers we've written a short story that's been put into this magazine. Now I've been hired to like change that into a novel and have it published by the in-house publishing house.
Okay.
And they've had I think Adrian Tchaikovsky's written some for here, the Warhammer universe and stuff. So it's strangely going from what was a very nerdy English underground thing in like the 90s to now a mainstream science fiction universe, and it's been odd to watch that. I remember playing it as a kid.
People are worried about its soul, I guess.
Yeah. But I mean, Warhammer is famously retconned everything in its universe about 40 times. That everything was written over and changed. So I find it funny when people are worried about that. It's like Warhammer's changed image about 75 times throughout its run. But I'm trying to think of what else I've been reading that I can even think of. Oh, I mean, I know that you love it, Piranesi.
Yes, yeah, good stuff.
Have you read Doctor Strange and Mr. Norrell? Or
yes, Jonathan Strange and
Jonathan Strange, not Doctor Strange.
I mean, Doctor Strange is cool too.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. Yeah, absolutely. I have read that. I read it before I started the channel, and I loved it. It was one of the reasons I started the channel, honestly, because the whole premise of my channel was fantasy. This is back to what we were talking about earlier. Fantasy is worthy of critical exploration. Here are some great examples, And I didn't make the video on Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell because it had just been too many years since I had read it, and I felt like I would need to reread it. And it's a big, fat book.
Yeah.
So I haven't done that, but I did read Piranesi and loved it. And it's very different. It could be a different author, both very talented, frankly. But Susanna Clarke amazes me because it's like, there are actors who are great actors, but they always play themselves, like Jack Nicholson. Jack Nicholson is always Jack Nicholson, and he's brilliant at being Jack Nicholson. And then there are authors like or actors like Daniel Day-Lewis or Meryl Streep who can play anyone. They can play your mother, and you'll be convinced that's my mother, right? Those are the ones that really amaze me. And I think Susanna Clarke is the author version of that, because Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell is so different from Peter Nazy. They're very different books, but they're both extremely impressive, fantastic books in their own ways. Yeah,
because I need to read Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, because it's been on my radar for such a long time, but it is because it's such a big book that
it's a big one.
Yeah. And I think, like, because I focus on series so much, that when I don't want to read those side by side, and I quite often read books side by side.
Well, if you can appreciate Jane Austen, then you might have a great time reading Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, because it does take a lot of its vibe from that early 19th century kind of literary milieu, but there's magic, and so it's fantasy, so it's really well done. It's brilliantly done. There are footnotes and stuff. So but it's a really cool, very atmospheric book, and I remember just loving it the whole way through and being deeply impressed, but it has been many years since I read it.
What else was I going to mention then? Because you mentioned footnotes, I just read Babel. Speaking of going back to Babel, but I just read.
I haven't read that yet. Did you like it?
I did. Yeah, I felt like it wasn't a perfect book. I know, like, for me personally, where people have been coming to it and they've been like, "This is the best." I think for how I perceived it, that some of the characters were a bit not flat, but a bit kind of not generic either, but they were there for a reason, and that everything in the book, the plot and everything, surfaces the themes in it. It's a very much a themes-based read, and
in that sense, I know it's very different from Poppy War, but it sounds like Kwang's Poppy War trilogy in that sense too, then, because I felt similarly about that, which I did read the Poppy War trilogy, and there are a lot of things about it that I really am impressed with, and other things that I thought, and it's probably a product of, and I suspect Babel is different, but a lot of modern fantasy tends to want to get to those big iconic moments without properly building up to them. I feel like there's this emphasis on action and big moments without the quieter moments that you need for those bigger moments to have the impact. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I won't lie. It's strangely enough that this book for me felt like it was doing the opposite.
Interesting.
It has a lot of quiet moments where, because it's about these kids in the Translation Institute, it basically, for large parts, like portions, it just turns into an essay. It's like there are actual lectures that are written down, and it feels like very much that lecture feeling of having someone try to, well, the different types of lectures there are. You've got the kind of drier, information based, you've got the really personable, like it creates that atmosphere of actually being in education really well.
Cool. Yeah.
And then because the whole book, I was guessing what was going to happen throughout until I didn't. And that, for some reason, up until that point, I was thinking, I'm really enjoying the world, I'm really enjoying the atmosphere. It's a bit formulaic. And then the formula was flipped, and I went, oh, well, that changes. I feel very differently now. And in fact, like, the ending was really it's extremely timely, to say the least. Maybe it's just in British life, but it's extremely timely. I mean, not even in relation to the fact that it's dealing with the colonial effects, and with it being set in 1816, with the colonial devastation around the world. I mean, that is it. We're I would love to think that we're in a time of reflection on that, but maybe it's just some of us are. But it does a fantastic job. I think that it makes up for some of the generic nature, I think, because of it's almost like it's sacrificing that to make the larger point for me. That I don't know, I think on a writing level, it would be a 4-star, but purely for how it made me feel, I gave it 5 stars.
Okay, that's cool, pretty
So
cool. Yeah, and plus it has linguistics in it, which is an automatic cool note for me.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, because it's funny because I'm a translation nerd, but a translation nerd in terms of I really love reading translated fiction now.
Uh-huh.
So and this is just a complete separate point. I believe that all translated fiction now that's translated to English, I would love to have a preface by the translator explaining how they came to the book.
Oh, that would be so
Um,
good. Yeah.
there's a where is it? It's here. There's a book called Human Acts by Han Kang,
Hmm.
and it's Korean, and it's written about a student uprising in South Korea that was violently put down.
Okay.
And it's really like hard hitting and devastating. And it's really interestingly told, switching from perspective from first person to second, third, like completely experimental. And then the book starts with an essay from the translator, kind of being like, here are the struggles I had translating it. Here's what I hope comes through. And it's like, so you go into it with that focus, and I think it really helps. And I always, now that I'm trying to read more translated fiction, I just wish everyone started with that, because
Yeah.
I just think it's fantastic when it has that.
Oh, I so agree with you. And I've done a fair bit of translating, mostly from Old English to modern English, but also some Old Norse to modern English, and some German and some French, and a little bit of this and that. And it's always a struggle. And it's not like I can decide, okay, from the beginning, this is the balance. You know, if I'm translating an Old English poem, am I going to be faithful to the meaning, or am I going to try to reproduce some of the aesthetic? And it seems like the more I do one, the less I can do of the other. So it's like, where am I going to have this balance? Where am I? And it's not like I decide here and then I can easily just stay there. It's like I'm constantly throughout the translation process revisiting, okay, where am I now in the spectrum between fidelity to meaning and a kind of getting this aesthetic vibe that I want to get across to give somebody the feel. Because if I just stay faithful to the meaning, it's going to be stiff. It's going to be boring. It's not going to give the feel of the original. Whereas if I go over here toward the feel, I'm going to lose a lot of the actual meaning that was in the original. And it's just, and there's probably other dimensions to it even there and beyond that. But that's the one I struggle with the most when I'm translating.
Well, I would say that that is actively a conversation that is had in one point of Babel. So like
Cool.
for you, that may be very much like a gratifying, like, oh, I'm not the only one that, in terms of how that feels. Because yeah, I think that's the main thing I took away, is that there's a real sense of just passion from the author towards translation, and like, because it was written during their degree.
Yeah.
And I think like, so that you feel like sometimes you feel like, oh, you're recycling some things you've learned today, and sometimes that comes through, but it's like, it's still very interesting, so I can't argue with it. It's fantastic to learn. But yeah, I feel like you may then enjoy certain elements of the book that even like on a personal level, that rather than a oh, this is a fun theoretical thing, for you it may be like an active reflection.
So in other words, you're politely saying that the parts that other people find boring are going to be cool for me.
Yeah, I was completely in the same. I was in the same boat. So many people were like, oh, you know, like, as an like, I think I saw Leanna give it 2 stars, and she said it's 5 stars as an essay, 2 stars as a fantasy novel. And I was
Ouch.
like, yeah, but for me, the book balances it. The book works well if you simultaneously A, are a nerd and love the act of translation, and B, hate empire. And the book is so clearly like just anti-empire, not only anti-empire, but very critical of other elements. I don't want to spoil anything, but other elements that aren't spoken about as much,
Like
that
colonialism in general, I guess.
yeah, and the influence of other voices that aren't discussed as much in terms of colonialism. And for me, that's what I was there for, in terms of like living in Britain, watching how we don't have any remorse or anything. That I love reading. It's like, you know, I'm just giving you all of the tea. I'm just going to give you all the tea that's happening on the internet at the moment.
Okay.
Someone released a review. I hope they're not watching this. Sorry if you are, but someone released a review that got a lot of flack on the internet this week of Babel, where they said that Babel made them feel bad.
They felt guilty because they belonged to a colonialist culture.
Yes, and they were like, the author made me feel bad. And so everyone was like,
well, then the author did her job, really.
Exactly, yeah. And it's an extremely it was very much a review that left me like physically, I was laughing as well as feeling terrible, because it was extremely funny, but also it was one of those things that I don't believe anyone deserves to be attacked on the internet, even when you're doing something that you just like, you should not have done that. You should have thought it through, right. Because it completely misses what the point of the book is. And if anything, the fact that what she said was actively what the book is doing. And so there was a very ironic element to the review.
Yeah.
And but I think it's made more people want to read Babel that hadn't picked it up yet. I've seen a lot of people say, oh, if this is what the book's about, I want to read that.
Yeah.
So it's
strange. It sounds like it. I mean, she did a lot about imperialism and colonialism in the Poppy War trilogies. It sounds like she's continuing her examination of this theme, which is an important one. And I completely agree with you. It's something we ought to be reflecting on. Frankly, it's, you know, if you don't reflect on the atrocities committed by your culture in the past, then, you know, you're not going to have a proper, not only not have a proper perspective on that, but you might be repeating some of the same mistakes unwittingly in the present. So
what was I going to say? Yeah, it's I mean, I don't want to go into the book too much because I'm now extremely interested in what you think about it.
Okay.
Because I feel like yours would be an interesting opinion now, considering the kind of personal aspect you can bring to it. But I think for what the author was trying to achieve, they did it, and I think that's all you can ask for sometimes.
Yeah.
Because I also have their she's written it's termed a literary fiction book. Her next one is, which comes out next year.
R.F. Kuang's next book it's not fantasy.
Yeah. In other words. No, it's a dark satire, I believe, around the publishing industry.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Wow.
It's about, if I remember correctly, an Asian author writes their debut book, and in the process dies. And then the main character is a white person who takes the manuscript and pretends that it's theirs, I believe.
Oh, wow.
And so it's this, I think it's super short, like 250 page book. And it's called, I mean, I don't actually know whether you can say the word on well, I imagine you can. It's because it would be like, it is a racial slur.
Okay, yeah.
In terms of a racial slur towards Asian people. That's
the title.
Yeah, so it's extremely provocative. I think that's what she's very much doing at the moment. She's writing some very provocative books, and wow. I have an arc for that. As soon as I saw it, I was like, I want to read that book. I want to know what she's doing now that she's moving out of fantasy a little.
Interesting.
So I plan on giving that a go. Because I think that's the most interesting thing you can do sometimes, is where you just do whatever you want.
Yeah, it's brave. I think she does a lot of brave things with her writing. So I definitely admire that. And I will read Babel or Babel, whichever pronunciation you like. I will definitely read it at some point. It's on my list. Even when I read The Poppy War and had my quibbles with it, I knew I was going to read whatever R.F. Kuang put out next. So I'm looking forward to reading that, especially with all the linguistic elements in it. So yeah, neat. Well, that was a pretty good sales job, actually, Ben.
I'll take that. I'll take that out and I'll put that up as my review of Babel.
Nice. Yeah, you can excerpt it now. You'll use it as a short, because that's the
Yeah.
thing now on YouTube is shorts,
yes.
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't know. I haven't made any shorts yet. I feel like I still don't quite, I haven't grasped the concept.
I feel like the reason I'm on YouTube is so I can avoid TikTok, and now they've basically brought TikTok over to YouTube. I'm like, oh no, I'm scared of them. I don't want to get involved.
Yeah. Well, anyway, people are doing it, and it seems to be working for some people.
Absolutely.
You know, Jake from Man Carrying Thing made this really hilarious video fairly recently where it's a spoiler. I mean, the video's been out for a week or two, so sorry if you haven't seen it, but it's just hilarious because it starts out as a short, right? In the vertical. And then there's a certain point in the video where it just starts getting wider and wider. And he's like, but is it a short? You know, it was just brilliant, I thought. And it was like this go horizontal kind of, you know, war cry, I guess.
Yeah, it's the hill to die on. It's
yeah. Did you see that one? I thought it was just brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. I pretty much watch any video that Jake puts out.
Yeah.
Like Jake was the reason that I started making videos.
Is that right? Wow.
Yeah, because I'd seen, like, I was a Daniel Green fanboy, like every other person, and then Jake started getting recommended. He came into my recommended feed, and so I watched a couple of his videos, and then they put out, it was Jake interviewing Daniel Green, and then that was like his explosion. Well, like a relative explosion.
Part of it, anyway. Yeah.
Now, of course, we see where he is, but at the time, it was like what got him to like 500 subscribers or something. And I remember being like, whoa, if someone at that level can talk to Daniel Green, then why not? Like, it's funny enough, that is exactly what Booktube is. Like, it is genuinely like that. Like, now that I've started, I have what is still a like relative to YouTube, a very small like amount of subscribers. But I have
Booktube is not quite as sexy as like video game channels and MMA channels and, you know, whatever. I mean, we have to, I think of ourselves in Booktube terms. So
absolutely. I also think it's I also think that it works differently in Booktube because it's not a numbers game, it's an opinions game. And so, like, you just have to, whatever you're doing just has to catch. So like the fact that I'm making a video with you is incredible. And like when I first started, I remember it was the first person that interacted, I was like, whoa, was Jake. And it's when he had about 3,500 subs. And he commented on, I reviewed A Man Called Ove by Frederick Bachman, and he commented on that, and I just remember being like, whoa, Man Carrying Thing just commented, and that was like the first instance. And like now having like conversations with Daniel Green or you, for instance, or just anyone, is the reason I think that making a channel is worth it, because it really it's not a judgmental place. And even now that I am kind of with uni and everything, I'm taking a step away from making as many videos. I have the kind of community that I've set up and the conversations I have, that I now can just talk to the people I like without having to worry about like, oh, he's not made videos, it's not worth talking to him. It's just, no, there's just a person to talk to. And that's what I think is great about Booktube, that it's just, there's no judgment on any behalf. It's just whoever wants to have a talk with who.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we all put our pants on or our trousers on one leg at a time, unless we're wearing skirts or whatever. So yeah, but So yeah, no, I love that element too, because we are actually all just people who are here because we're passionate about books. We're passionate about storytelling. And in my case, it's, I stick to fantasy, but I do read other things and love other things too. My day job is I'm a medievalist, so I can talk to people about that too, about being, a student of literature. All of that stuff is just, yeah, we're here because we love this. And I think one thing I didn't quite get when I started, because I really famously, I guess I've said many times that I knew nothing about Booktube when I started a channel, which is true. I really knew nothing. I just thought, I'm going to start a YouTube channel about fantasy to support this class I've been teaching. And I bet nobody's done anything like it before. And I quickly was disabused of that notion, because you go type on YouTube. I think I literally typed, like fantasy on YouTube or something. And then of course, you see Daniel Green or whoever, the Murphy Napier or whatever, they come up because they're the bigger channels. So I realized, oh, wait, people are doing this. Yeah. Well, I'll just go ahead and do it anyway. And then, I did. And the best part by far has been the community. And we say it over and over and over again, but it really, I'll never get tired of saying it. It's just the people you meet. We have these common passions, and I will never get tired of learning from people like you and all the other lovely people I get to talk to as a result of diving in here and being part of this. It's just, to me, it's every bit as significant in terms of what I've learned as being in the university or, being an academic. In fact, my Malazan read with AP, A Critical Dragon, I've described it as the most profound literary journey of my life. And it happened on this platform, not during graduate school, not during my BA, not, it was a YouTube thing, and I've enjoyed every bit of it. And I wasn't even graded or anything. So,
because I think it works the other way around for me, where because I have the ability to discuss things with everyone here, it's allowed me to take that into the kind of classroom scenario at university where.
Oh, true.
I don't feel me about 5 years ago when I first went to university would never answer a question, would just sit quietly and try to just become invisible. Whereas now I find myself answering too many questions because I want to have that conversation, and it really it breaks down the wall with the lecturers as well. That it just helps in terms of they learn more about you to help you progress. I think it's been beneficial the other way around, the same way it's been for you.
They feed each other really nicely. I'm actually a better teacher than I was 3 years ago before I started the channel, and it's because of interactions like this. Really, I mean, it's been fantastic in that sense. So I can't even separate my YouTube activities from my teaching, from my writing. All of it really partakes of the same energy and the same love and passion. So, I mean, I can't separate those things. Well, that's probably a great thing to finish on, a nice high to finish on. It's been a lovely conversation, Ben. I really appreciate you taking the time, especially this busy time of year. You're off to see family very shortly. And so I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me here. I have enjoyed myself thoroughly. And I will, of course, have a link to your channel in the description below. Overly Average Ben. I meant to ask you, what's up with the name Overly Average Ben?
It's it was actually, I came up with the idea for that when I wanted to do Twitch when I was like 18. And then it's always stuck around in terms of, because I think there's a dual meaning to it in terms of you're overly average, as in you're just
paradoxical.
Exactly. And so I've always thought that is it's an eye-catching name, and it also sums up what to expect from me, because you're not getting amazing editing, you're not getting profound thoughts, it's just everything is like a jack of all trades element. I think that I think it sums up my channel perfectly.
Well, I hope you'll pardon me for disagreeing, but there is some brilliant, actually brilliant content on your channel. There's some really fun, entertaining stuff there. I encourage everybody to check out Overly Average, ironically named Overly Average Ben, and enjoy the content there. You've made me laugh a lot of times, and you've made me think a lot of times. So I thank you for that. And I thank you for this conversation. And
Yes, thank you for having me.
oh, it's been a delight. It's been a joy. And thank you, everybody else out there watching. And until next time.